Hi, everybody. Welcome to Christian Homestead. My name is Jared. I got an email from 801 Mom. I can only assume that 801 is a reference to the Utah area code, but I'm not sure. Subject line, Shroud of Turin, side by side. And then in the email, thought you would enjoy this. Interesting face symmetry for the picture of Christ our church has chosen to include in the gospel library in comparison to the Shroud of Turin. Our special witness of Christ have chosen this painting. Do you know any backstory for who chose to include this painting? Keep on keeping on, brother. And then here's the side by side. And I'm not an expert at facial features and things like that. There are people on YouTube that do a really good job. There's been a lot of talk about the supposed Joseph Smith picture. So you might want to look that up, check that out. That's something that's relatively recent. But here we have the painting done by Dell Parson. Everybody recognizes it, right? Everybody in the church recognizes this. It's iconic. And yeah, it is still used, and I really like it. It's been around my entire life. And it's interesting because, I don't know, maybe 2, 3, 4 months ago, we were talking about this for some reason, and I asked for you guys to send me essentially what you knew about this painting, because I had heard the myth that somebody had said that this painting is the closest representation that we have to what Jesus Christ actually looks like. And as the years have gone on, after I was when I was a teenager, I think I probably accepted that. But as time has gone on, I've kind of taken that more and more with a grain of salt. And especially once I started my channel. And my channel is all about getting to the bottom of things and finding primary sources, debunking things where needed. And so we finally come to this topic, and I got another email. This is from Sheila Fisher, Dell Parson, the artist's story. And in the email, I had read about him years ago. Here's an interview with him. And then there's a link that takes you to a blog called Mormon Artist. At one time, this person did have podcast episodes and did a bunch of interviews, including with Dell Parson. That's what we're going to read from. It appears that this blog was run by Ben Crowder. I don't think that he's doing it anymore because I haven't seen anything recent. But there's some links to different things that you can check out. You got Facebook, Twitter, and things like that, articles. So I'll put a link for this in the description box below. I don't think that he's too active nowadays, but I could be wrong. And you have this interview with Dell Parson. It's dated December 2013, and the interview was done by Katherine Morris. And here's a picture of Parson. And they talk about a lot of things here, but we're interested in this part. So question, I know you've talked a lot about this, but I wanted to hear the story behind the red robe Christ painting since it's so iconic in Mormonism. Answer or response. For me, the really important part is that I had a wife and daughter killed in a car accident. The only reason I say that is that when I did that painting, it was after the accident. And at that particular time in my life, I was about the most teachable, humble person, and I don't think you can dismiss that. Then the church asked me to paint 3 paintings of the Savior. It was so they could have things to reproduce for publishing, so if they needed an image, they'd have an image. One was washing the feet, one was knocking on the door, and the other one was a painting of a portrait. Yeah, and we all know these paintings too, the washing the feet and knocking on the door. Those are also iconic. I grew up with those. And so they asked me to do that, and I met with a group of designers and general authorities. It wasn't the first presidency or anything. And we talked about what they would like in these paintings. I guess it would probably be called the Correlation Committee. And that's interesting because I recently did a video about the Correlation Committee. Just in a nutshell, the church has a committee called the Correlation Committee. In fact, recently we read that the Correlation Committee itself is actually the first presidency in the Quorum of the 12, but they have assistants. So you have this board of people. It's directly overseen by 2 apostles at any given time, but It's these people that make sure that everything that the church puts out is doctrinal and consistent and correct. Okay. All right. Continuing. What they said was, we want a strong Mormon image of the Savior, a more masculine image. After that, I started going through a sketch process. I do a sketch and send it to the church. I don't know for sure who saw those sketches. I really don't. But I sent them to an art director, Warren Lutch, or Luke, or I'm not sure how to pronounce that. He would take the sketch to different people and they would write comments and send them back. I went through at least 5 sketches. It's been 20 years or more, so it's hard for me to remember exactly. But, sometimes I'd get discouraged. I'd do a sketch and they'd write, no, don't like that one. You know what I mean? It's not easy. You go out there and you do the best you can. I sent a sketch to the church. One night I had a dream. So, okay, this is where things start to get interesting. That somebody was talking to me and they said, in the morning, the church is going to call you and tell you that the sketch isn't going to work, but don't worry about it because everything will work out just fine. Then in the morning, Warren called me and said, your sketch isn't going to work. Give us another sketch. So I was ready to do another sketch, but the sketch came back in the mail about 3 or 4 days later. And there was a letter with it saying, don't worry about doing another sketch. Develop this one into a painting. But do these things: more intensity, more love, older looking, more Jewish looking, no forked beard, wider shoulders. Just things like that. And then I painted the painting and submitted it to the church. I don't know for sure who saw it when it was accepted. I do know that if it's a painting of the Savior, it has to be approved by the First Presidency. And that's all I really know about what happened there. The only other thing that happened was after that, when Warren Lutch called and said, do you mind signing some prints that we're making for the general authorities of the church? We're going to give every one of them a picture of this painting. Would you mind signing them? I said, sure. And then that was kind of it. Nobody called. I've heard all kinds of interesting stories about it, but no one ever said something like, oh, you nailed it or anything. But it got approved. I really feel like I was inspired on it and got some help. I feel like I was really trying my very best to go by the Spirit. And then that's it. So I think that we can say this comes directly from the artist. It's not like a general authority said, yes, this is the closest that anyone's gotten to actually depicting Christ. I think probably what has happened is well-meaning people, they hear the story. I mean, we just heard it, and you could come away and retell the story and make some assumptions, maybe embellish it a little bit or misremember certain parts. And then when you retell it, you have the telephone game where over time it becomes, oh yeah, that painting right there. There were general authorities that said that this is actually what Christ looks like. It was approved by the First Presidency, and that's what they said. I think that that's what happened. I think that it just developed into folklore, a myth. Now, on the other side, I wouldn't be surprised. Like later on, maybe at the second coming, when Christ is here and we see him and we compare him with this painting, I would not be surprised if he does look like this. I don't believe it, but I wouldn't be surprised. I'm sure that Dell Parson did receive a lot of inspiration. And then as far as the changes that they wanted him to make, that's actually a good segue to this. I don't think I read this in a video, but just like a week or two ago, I swear I read this. So, okay, this is Bishop Victor L. Brown of the Presiding Bishopric, the October 1970 General Conference. The name of the talk is Upon You, My Fellow Servants. And there's this interesting part that I feel like this goes along with what we're talking about and why the church directed Dell Parson to make certain changes. Okay, so he says, it is particularly important that young men holding holding his priesthood, become intimately acquainted with him in order to know and to understand him. Unfortunately, artists and others have pictured him as effeminate, soft, and sad. If we analyze his life at all, we see a person who was masculine, strong, vigorous, interested in all that was going on about him, surely loving and kind, but at the same time, one who could exhibit righteous anger. If this were not true, how could he have caused rough fishermen to follow him with just one sentence, "Follow me, and I will make you fishers of men"? He spent his youth and young adulthood as a carpenter, a trade requiring strength and skill. Would he have dared drive the money changers from the temple had he not been a man of great strength and courage? It takes a man of unusual warmth to attract throngs of little children as the Savior did. No other man has lived whose influence has been so profound in directing the course of human behavior. So it may have been more along these lines as young men and young women, but maybe especially young men, as they look at, this image of Christ that the church intended to be kind of like their main image of Christ. It seems like they were thinking about how we would perceive Christ. And they don't want us to view him as effeminate and sad and, sickly or something like that. But something to look up to and emulate, which we should do from his teachings, of course. But there's also the visual piece. Artwork is very important because you start to kind of accept that as your reality. Images stick in your mind. And so if this is going to be seen over and over and over again, this is what the church wants to communicate visually. And that makes perfect sense to me. It's interesting because this image has become so iconic. You see it in lots of different places, even outside of the church. In fact, this year, just a few months ago, I was given a tour by Prophet President Terry W. Patience. This is him right here at the top left, a picture of him. He is the Prophet President of Remnant Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. They're a break-off from the RLDS Church, which is currently the Community of Christ. This is a branch that broke off from that tradition. Their headquarters is across the street on the north side of Lexington from the Community of Christ Temple. And they have this headquarters building, and I was invited to come and take a tour. And this is the visitor center, and they have the Dell Parson portrait of Christ right here, because as you look to the left, I'll have to click this way. As you look to the left, you have their previous prophet presidents that are up on the wall on both this side and then also on this side, if the image will load. Sorry, you can't really see it very well, but you get the idea. And then of course they have Christ up here because they would view Christ as the head of their church, but they use this painting. It's a very powerful image. It's a very powerful image. But I went ahead because I need to be able to refer to this in the future, because I know it's going to come up either by email or comment, or maybe just someone in my personal life. And so I want to remember this. I put this on my spreadsheet called Quotes A through Z. This is currently row 289 for Jesus Christ, appearance and artwork. And I have the two things that we just read. And I also added it to, I'm making a little bit of an adjustment to this spreadsheet. This one is called Quotes, Prophecy, False / Unverified. I may change that to something else. I probably will. I've chosen to rename this column right here. It used to be just prophecy / vision, but now I'm including myths. And so this is that spreadsheet where you have all these unverified or false prophecies, like the vision of the destruction of America by Anonymous, the Yellow Dog prophecy, the coming of the Great White Chief, George Albert Smith's supposed vision of World War III, and so forth. Well, I'm going to go ahead and add this one because now we know that this is false, according to Dell Parson himself. Although, again, this may actually be what Christ looks like. I wouldn't be surprised, like I said. Okay, that's going to be it for this one. I'll talk to you guys later.